Okay, so like I said, I called this like it's kind of like a challenge and kind of not. I mean, I could have called it a powwow, but really I just like to well, first of all, I'm Nancy Wallace Lobbs, and I've been a real estate investor for a long time. I mean, well over a decade. I used to have a property management company. I've done everything from wholesaling to flipping. I teach people how to use their short term, or I'm sorry, their self-directed IRA, how to invest. And, the short-term rental market has just been awesome and it's very lucrative. But what I also know is that there's a lot of pitfalls that when you first get it, I mean, first of all, I sort of fell into it about 3 years ago. I wanted to just have a house for my husband and I to go to, and it's in Granbury, and we love it, and we love going there. I live in Dallas, so it's about 90 minutes away. It's on the lake. And we just, and then we're like, oh, well, we should start renting this out. And so we did. And so a lot of what I do as an investor sometimes comes from trial and error. I mean, I look at a lot of YouTube videos, just like I'm sure you do. I've read tons of books and everything. But then when I find things that work, I really like to share. That's my passion to I was very fortunate early in my investing career to have a wonderful mentor. And what she did for me was she helped me avoid huge financial mistakes. And that's kind of my goal with everyone that I present to and talk to, is really just give them a lot of value and education about whatever strategy we're talking about for real estate investing. I'm also a real estate broker here in Texas. And years ago, I used to teach when I had my property management company. I was one of the very few brokers certified in property management to teach other property managers how to manage their property. So that was all long-term rental. So what I can say is being a property manager really helped me kind of move right into short-term rental, because there's a lot of management, there's a lot of organizational skills. So a lot of skills that you have in property management just transfer over to short-term rental. Currently, I really like doing the short-term rental. So what we're going to talk about today is pricing. And since we have a smaller group, I'm going to be open for questions. So what I'd like to do is go through the presentation. It's probably going to be about 30, 35, maybe 40, depending if how winded I get, or overwinded, I guess I should say. And then I will want to, entertain any and all questions, and some things I might say, well, we're going to talk about that tomorrow or Wednesday. So, or you can always put them in the chat. So we'll definitely leave some time for Q&A afterwards. So now we're going to get started here with there we go. So today what I'm going to go over is what goes into pricing your short-term rental. As I was explaining right before this started, was that the number one question I get asked is, well, where should I look for a short-term rental? And so that's kind of another presentation. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll actually find where I did a video about that. So today I'm going to kind of focus on pricing strategies and KPIs. So I do a lot of consulting and coaching with other people that want to get their short-term rentals up. And what I'll do is they'll call me and ask me, hey, what's going on? I'm not getting any bookings. And so we'll kind of look over what their bookings are. And so what I've found is a lot of hosts don't know where the KPIs are for the numbers, like how you can kind of tell how your short-term rental is going to be performing. And so all of that goes into really your pricing strategy. So we're going to make some assumptions today that, number one, we're going to just say, okay, well, we're looking for a short-term rental. And, once you get it, then part of the success is knowing how to strategize about pricing. It's not just, throwing it up on Airbnb and hope you get bookings. There's a lot more that goes into it if you want to make a lot of money. So in the short-term rental business, I say you got to have a strategy, because when you ask me, like, where should you look? Like, first, the thing I'll say is like, well, where would you go on vacation? Are you like the mountains? Do you like the ocean? Do you like lakes? Is it close to, a sporting events? Is it close to a theme park? So you kind of got to think about, if you haven't purchased a property yet, or if you're thinking about a property that maybe you have under contract, or I turned in one of my long-term rentals into a short-term rental. And I basically ask these questions. First of all, who do I want to get to my properties? What's my business model going to be like? What's going to attract people to the area? What price point do I need it to perform at? How am I going to screen guests? And what additional services do I need? So, kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of a guide, right? We start there. Now, we're not going to go into all of these today because those are multiple presentations, but you can go to my YouTube channel and I have several videos on all these different things. So, first off, I want to say not every property works as a short-term rental. You really got to kind of think about the location, just like anything in real estate, the amenities, the appeal, nearby attractions, and serving multiple types of groups. What do I mean by that? So, are you going to rent to families? Are you going to be pet friendly? The size of your property is going to kind of dictate how many people can stay, right? Just because you can put in 20 beds in a house doesn't mean you should, right? Like if you have a 3 bedroom and you want to put, 8 bunk beds, 4 and 2 bedrooms, and then have a queen bed. Well, you know what? You got to think about who's coming to your house, right? So I either have 3 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms. They all have 2 bathrooms. I've talked to a lot of people that where if you have even a 3 bedroom house and you only have 1 bathroom and you're trying to, have 10 guests. I mean, think about that. I get girls' weekends, and if you had 10 women or 10 guys, I guess, coming to your house and they all had 1 bathroom, yeah, you're probably going to have a complaint, right? Because that's just not enough. And if you're on a septic system, that's definitely, too many people on that size of property. So location, I'll see there's tons of Facebook groups out there. You can ask all kinds of questions about this area and that. So you might have a really very cute house that you have found and you just think it's going to make the perfect short-term rental, but it's in a high crime district. So how are you going to make your guests feel safe? It doesn't mean that it won't work. It's just you might have to think kind of outside the box about if somebody comes to your short-term rental and they drive there, they take an Uber, taxi, whatever, and the neighborhood is pretty run down, but your house is just as cute as it can be right in the middle of that. Well, the first impression for your guests might be that they don't feel safe, or if worst case scenario, they could have a great time, but in the comments when they leave, because reviews, the reviews of how people are going to review your property, one of the reviews could be, not the best area. So you have to think about, just like anything in real estate, the location. I'm gonna go a little bit more into amenities, but this is like, swimming pools and hot tubs and things that you can add to your listing, not only to get more bookings, but when you have more bookings, you get more money, right? And then the appeal. And what I mean by that is what is going to make your short-term rental stand out among the competition? Because right now, everybody's wanting to get into the short-term rental business. I mean, it is great. It's a good opportunity. There are some things that are changing in the market where I've seen a little bit of slowdown, but I think that has to do with gas and, kids are going back, remote learning is kind of over. Some places are still having it. So things have kind of shifted, but still people are going on vacation. Now, one of the things that I've experienced is that people are not booking out. Now I have bookings for particular holiday weekends, out through like October, November, December. But for the most part, what I'm seeing a pattern in are people are booking last minute, a few days ahead of time. They're not booking weeks out. Now, that could be because, in Texas, it's super hot or it was up until a couple days ago. It was really hot. And so things kind of slowed down a little bit in August, but I think school started here a little bit earlier. Gas was really high, so I didn't get as many bookings as I would normally think I would get, but then they started picking up. And then as things slow down, I'm going to show you some tricks that you can do to go, whoa, I need to get some more bookings. Nearby attractions, that would be any of a theme park, something for people to do. Just think about like sporting events, but also it could be hospitals. Like maybe your target group that you want to rent to are traveling nurses and doctors. So there's all kinds of different platforms. I think there's over 100 platforms that you can actually list your short-term rental on. Airbnb just happens to be the biggest one, VRBO. So for me, I do VRBO. I get 14% of my bookings from VRBO, and then Airbnb accounts for maybe like, let's see, about 80%. And then I've been working on this last year, direct booking. So that takes up, and we'll kind of talk about that in a minute. So, and then I serve families. I also have working people like I've had in one of my locations, it just so happens that a lot of guys that are working on a power plant or the road or whatever, it's like 4 or 5 guys or companies paying for it. And even though there's a lot of guys in there or gals, and they're usually construction, I have personally only had one issue with a guest that, didn't leave my property the way they should be. And I filed a claim and got it paid for, and it was all great. But I have a way that I like to screen the guests too. But if you have a 1 bedroom, 1 bath condo on the beach, it could do really well. But you're probably going to be, couples or one person, or maybe a family of three. Maybe if you have a fold out futon or sofa, maybe you could do 4 people or a couple people, kids. So, bedroom size is really kind of translates to beds. How many people can you comfortably sleep in your property? So again, a 1 bedroom condo might have the ability, maybe they have big living room, you can put 2 sofas in there, you put bunk beds, you might be able to sleep more people, but is there a place for them to eat and that kind of thing? Because one of the things I talk about is not only do you need to have a place for people to eat, but you also need to have an area where they gather. So if you have a dining room that only seats 4 people, you can sleep 8, but they can only, think about those kinds of things. Like, how people like to travel and what they like to do when they are on vacation or just getting away. Now, again, I've already said this, the number one question, where should I buy? Now, what I do is, this is my advice to you. So number one, if you have no idea, where you want to purchase a short-term rental, then what I would do is to narrow down that search. First off, figure out who's going to manage it. Are you wanting to do, like, I love the Asheville, I think it's North Carolina area, and and one day I want to have a short-term rental there. But right now, I don't have boots on the grounds. I don't know who's going to manage it. And I have used management companies before. So for me to buy outside of Texas, I've got to know who's going to manage that property. So that's what you have to kind of think of, some business questions. Who's going to manage the property if it's not, within a half hour, 45-minute drive to your property? Once you've kind of identified that area, so I'll give you an example. I had a rental property in Grand Prairie. And when I first bought the property, I owned it like 6 or 7 years, had, long-term tenant, and they built a huge water park just a couple blocks from my, long-term rental. I was like, before the pandemic, I was like, dang, let's turn that into a short-term rental. They have all this shopping. You can also Google where hotels are being built. Why? Because that's kind of a clue to where people are going, right? And that's kind of your competition, so if you find an area where they're doing a lot of building of hotels, that might be an area to look at. But I say look at Google Maps, and there's a search feature in Google Maps where you can say, okay, I'm thinking about buying in this area. You can narrow it down and you can see what is in and around the area that might make it attractive for people to rent. So for example, I live in Frisco, Texas. It's become a big sporting, we have a lot of sporting events. They now have the PGA of America here. They have soccer, they have football. So there's a lot of sporting events. So it's really easy to find out, okay, well, when's this event happening and that kind of thing. So that might be an area that, the housing prices are kind of high in Frisco, but, you could, I do know people that are buying and opening up short-term rentals in Frisco. So, you think about beaches and lakes and mountains and theme parks and activities. So I'm just going to use Granbury again because this is what attracted to me. It's close to Dallas Fort Worth. So small towns close to, airports, how can people get there easily? They offer fishing and they have fishing tournaments and they have boating and swimming and all the things that go along with the lake. So they also happen to have a really awesome, um, historic area that is really cute, very, downtown area. And the city itself does an amazing job of promoting tourism. So it's kind of a no-brainer. And they want to build more hotels there, but right now there's a moratorium. They don't have the infrastructure to build more hotels. So they actually rely on the short-term rental folks to come in. And since I've been doing short-term rentals there, about every day I see a new host there. So they're probably getting to a little saturation point. Now let's talk about amenities. Now, you may not know this, but when people search for Airbnbs, they search for certain things. Obviously, they're searching for the size. Pools and hot tubs actually come to the top of a search engine. So, one of our houses has a pool and it was booked solid this past summer. I mean, like guests were checking in, checking out, and then one of our other, we have a little house that is kind of, there wasn't really any amenity to it. I mean, it's a cute little house, but it wasn't on the lake or anything. And so we invested and put a hot tub in, and that thing has just, I mean, it's not even a high-end short-term rental, and it just does awesome. I mean, even in the summertime, I did really good. A lot of people now, when we all go back to having to go back to the office, but I think there's still a lot of remote work, having a dedicated workspace where people can, you have the Wi-Fi, people like short-term rentals because there's a full kitchen, pet friendly. I'm a pet friendly short-term rental owner. I like to travel with my pets. Now, I will say I only allow dogs. I don't do cats. I did have somebody ask me if they could bring their hamster, which I agreed. And I have a small pet fee, which I kind of take that money and put it in escrow. And if there were any damages, but I make my house pet friendly, with the flooring and the carpets, and I provide dog bowls, and I, have a fenced in area for the animals to do their business. And we're not talking about emotional sport animals now. We're just talking about, regular dogs. Free parking. Now, these are all searches. People look for these things when they're searching for a short-term rental. So if they're going to Paris, or they're going to Denver, or they're going to, California, they're looking for amenities that they want so that, they can find a million houses that are 3-bedroom, 2-bath, sleep 8, 10 people, but then they're going to narrow it down. And one of the searches, I didn't even put it on here, I forgot about it, was king size bed. So if you think about it, if you're able to have one bedroom, I usually put it in the master, that you can, put comfortably a king size bed. It's big enough. Highly recommend it. So my setup is usually king bed in the master, and then queens everywhere else. It makes the turn for my cleaners a lot. When I first started, I did do bunk beds, but I found them to be too much of a liability. And unless you can afford to have them built solidly in the wall, for me, that just didn't work. Washer and dryer, air conditioning. I know I was on a trip and I went to an area that's not known for having air conditioning, and it happened to be a little bit warmer. And man, I wish I would have had air conditioning. Now, if you are in an area that doesn't have air conditioning, because it's not Texas, because if it's in Texas, you need to have air conditioning, but maybe up in the mountains or something like that, then I would say provide some kind of fans for people, just because, some people like to have it a little bit cooler when they sleep. Now, one of the things that people, kind of forget about is it's wonderful to decorate your short-term rental. It's great to get bookings, and it's great to get feedback. But one of the things that I think hosts need to focus more on is how to get booked, because there are times when there's no festivals going on. The theme park got closed, or maybe, people are coming there for different reasons. So one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you can actually find on Airbnb, is called occupancy rate. Occupancy just means how often, like if people view your property, how often is it getting booked? So for example, if you have 800 views, people are looking at your listing, they're looking at it on Airbnb, but they're not booking it, then that should tell you that, okay, that's a lot of people and nobody's booking it, or maybe only 1% is booking it, right? So that would be 8 bookings. That'd be okay. But there are some things you can do to increase your occupancy rate. And this is a report that you can actually get on Airbnb on any of your properties. So I did a little research and I was like, okay, well, how can I increase that occupancy rate? So number one, they said microwave, will give you a 1.5 increase. Now these numbers are tiny, but let me finish this whole thought and I'll see where it's taking me. A hair dryer, right? So and I get asked this all the time, is there a hair dryer? And I only provide one hair dryer. What I found is that sometimes people bring one, and I've acquired a couple other hair dryers, but we have one hair dryer. That's what I provide. And the next one, the iron and ironing board, I can't even tell you last time I used an ironing board. I'll let my husband do that. But this is like a request I get all the time. Do you have an ironing board? So now some people might just do an iron, but then think about where are they going to iron at? So I do get an ironing board. And I don't get one of those. I get an actual ironing board. I couldn't believe how much they cost. I mean, if you have the way to build it in where it folds down, they have those folding ones. That's a great thing too. But an ironing board, and look at that 3.7 increase on occupancy just by adding that feature. So I got one that hangs on the wall, has a little carriage for the iron and all that. And then coffee maker, which that's probably a no-brainer because probably everybody knows. You'll see a lot of things about coffee bars and how some places have expansive coffee bars. So I am a coffee drinker. I'm a Mr. Folgers gal with a Mr. Coffee, and that's what I have. I don't have Keurigs. I don't have tea kettles. I don't, I do provide tea bags, but I haven't found that not having a coffee bar, like we just set up a little area with the coffee pot and we provide a starter set of coffee and creamers and some teas and things like that, but a 1% increase. So the total increase with just these three things that really don't cost a lot of money. I mean, you could get properties that, or you can get microwaves that are like, $40, $50 to sit on the counter. So these things in themselves don't cost a lot of money as opposed to, buying a hot tub, but they can increase, if you just add these, you can increase your occupancy by almost 6%. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's look at the next slide. Oops, I think I got them out of order here. So what can happen here, I think it's on the next slide, is if you have 200 views, right, and you have a 2% occupancy rate, that means you're getting about 4 bookings a month, right? So there's 4 weekends and whatever. And what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow is how you can fill in those gaps, because where I'm at, we have a lot of weekenders like Friday and Saturday. So I've had to do some things to extend those stays or make more revenue off of people who are coming in on Friday, Saturday. So I think I have an example of what my booking rate looks like. Also, with your short-term rental, you have to manage the guest expectations. So you can have, again, the most beautiful short-term rental. You have all the amenities, you have professional photographs, but you didn't build a hospitality business. Because I always tell people, if you don't like people, don't own a short-term rental. This is even different than, like I said, I've been a property manager for over 10 days with, being a landlord, and this is a different kind of property management. So number one of the key indicators. So a lot of people that get on Airbnb, their goal is to become a super host. It should be your goal too. That means you get like 5-star reviews, you don't have cancellations. But one of the things that Airbnb rates you on is how fast your response time, how fast you get back to somebody who's either making an inquiry, approving a booking, having a question. So if you're waiting like, 48, 72 hours to get back to people, that's going to affect you being able to become a super host. So it is a hospitality business and you do have to be available. And if it's not you, you have to have a backup plan, whether that's a co-host, whether that's a management company. The other thing you're going to need to do is invest in a cleaning service. So the number one complaint among guests about short-term rentals is the level of cleanliness. Now, I know, when we're trying to run our business and we're, looking at all of our costs and everything. So we might think, well, getting someone that only charges, let's say $50 to clean a short-term rental, that's not going to cut it, right? And the fee that you'll pay for cleaning is going to be kind of dependent on the area that you're in. So, I pay anywhere from $125 to $150, depending on the size of the property. And that includes, them doing the turnover, the laundry and everything. So I think that's pretty good, for the area I'm in. But you rely so heavily on your cleaning service, because I'm going to just give you an example of something that happened to me. So I had a guest check into one of my higher end short-term rentals. And then when they checked out, I had new people coming in the same day. So one checks out at 11. The next guest checks out at 3. Now the cleaner I have, she's, used to being able to do that turn and everything. So everybody gets checked in, all is good. And this is a reservation that's, pretty a good chunk of change, 8 people. It's a 4-bedroom house. So I get a mess. So I go to bed, all's good. I get up the next morning. I'm a very early morning riser, and it's like 4 a.m. and I'm checking my phone. And oh my goodness, I get a message from the guest that I did not see because I went to bed at 11:30 or before 11:30. And when they turned back the comforter to get in bed that night, guess what? There were no sheets on the bed, no sheets. Now, this is a cleaning company I've been using, and so she struggles to get people because if I know that she went to the property, everything's going to be good, but sometimes she can't make it there. Now, to me, this was I was pretty irritated by this because this is like, why would you make the bed? The bed was perfect. I mean, they showed me a picture. I mean, it had all the pillows, it had all the blankets, the way it's supposed to be staged, but they turned it back, no sheets. Interesting. So anyway, what we ended up doing was, of course, I apologized. So I refunded the guest's cleaning fee. I also didn't pay my cleaner, and she agreed with that. And we got sheets to the the guest the next morning for this one bed. But still, at 11:30, who would think to check under the comforter to make sure that there was sheets? So things will happen. One time, the cleaners forgot to empty the coffee grounds, and it had been a couple days in between gas. So you can imagine, and it's a little humid in Texas, so a little bit of mold, growing in the coffee grounds. So you just never know. So part of hospitality, things will happen, but for you building your hospitality business, it is how you're going to react to it, right? And how you're going to take care of it. The next thing I want to talk about is your accurate listing information. Now, you might say, well, why are you going over all this? Well, because once you get up and going, Airbnb is going to give you a little boost to the top, and VRBO, they all do. So you're going to get bookings, right? Whether you price it right or you didn't price it right, but you're going to get bookings. To get future bookings, you have to rely on those people, those guests, because they're going to review you. And if they had a bad time or something was off or you didn't take care of it, guess what? They're going to write that, and that's going to be a public review for every guest that may book your property. So that's why this is so important. Accurate listing information. Airbnb will actually refund people money if they go to a listing and it doesn't have like what the pictures look like, if it doesn't have like if you don't have your cameras disclosed, like I have cameras on all the property, not on the inside, but on the outside, but you have to not only disclose that you have them, but also the location. So there have been some scams by guests that they'll say, well, the listing wasn't what it wasn't accurate. So just make sure you're very accurate in your description and your house rules. And then I would recommend, especially if you're kind of new, to do flexible cancellation policies. So what does that mean? Well, it depends. I've done it where if they cancel 24 hours before their check-in, they get their money back. Why? Because there's ways to rebook it. So for me, if I'm going to go on vacation and something happens, I need to know I can get my money back. And so I think that's kind of the success of, why I've been able to stay booked. I don't really fret too much that I'm going to lose out. I know there are some hosts who have strict cancellation policies. And so if somebody dies or they're in a car wreck, they're not going to give them any money back. But the thing is that the guests can actually go back to Airbnb, and there's a good chance that Airbnb is going to give them their refund anyway. So then for me and the whole cancellation policies, I try to make it as flexible as possible, because that also helps the algorithms, which I don't know how that does it, but it makes the search easier. And it's kind of one of those things that people do search for. And then provide detailed information about your Wi-Fi. If you have, I used to have a one of those thermostats that you could manipulate via Wi-Fi, and I had to give it up. It was just too complicated, even for me, and to explain it to the guests. But there's some cool ways that you can create QR codes that they can scan with their phone, and it'll have the directions. Some places have fancy lights that they're controlled. And like in my property, we have several walls that have 3 or 4, it's an older property, and has 3 or 4 light switches, so you got to click on this one. Does it do the ceiling fan? Does it do the outdoor light? Does it do the garage light? So it's kind of nice. What I do is I kind of take a picture and I'll put it in my welcome book. I don't really like those little stickies. You could do that too, though, on the light switches. but you'll get calls. So when I had I can't remember what that was called, but it was those thermostats, Google Nest thermostat. And I would get calls all the time. How do you work the thermostat or what? And it was tricky. I mean, it was, very sensitive to touch and all of that. So we finally just took it out. I didn't really see a cost difference for most people weren't running my AC 24/7 because we have some things in it about the AC unit. And basically in Texas, if you run your AC at, 62 degrees, on 100 degree days, it's going to freeze up and then you won't have any AC. So we tell guests that. And so far, knock on wood, never had a problem with that. Pricing points. So a lot of times hosts will they'll just throw so there's a couple of different ways you can do pricing. So there's Price Labs, which it's a subscription service. It'll kind of go in and do a bunch of algorithms and it'll do recommendations of what you should be charging. There's also a website I'm going to show in a minute that I talk about a lot called AirDNA, and you can put in any property, put in the number of beds that you have, and it'll give you the average price, right? But it's just an average. And a lot of times people just put their listing up and then that's the end of it. They don't go in and change it. They don't know why they're not getting any bookings, and they don't, they might be missing out on dollars. So paying attention to your pricing is very important to running a successful and profitable short-term rental. One of the things that I do is I'm very involved with what's going on in and around my short-term rentals in the area. Are there, special events coming up? Are there, like if you have Super Bowl, like I've known people, when we had the Super Bowl here a few years ago in Dallas, that they rent out their own home and they were getting like $2,000 a night. So don't just set it and forget it. Go in and manipulate your prices on, through the Airbnb calendar. Now, what I do is I use a platform called hospitable.com, and it merges all my calendars, right? So I only, we talk about calendar management. So I don't have to go into Airbnb and VRBO and all. I can just do it in one place. Now, I will tell you that from time to time, I will go into Airbnb specifically, because if I see that my views are going up, but my bookings are going down, I'll go into Airbnb and I'll change up the days or the prices on days. So like maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, for example, maybe I'll charge $175 a night, but on Friday and Saturday, I'll charge $275 or $250, depending on what's going on. So the more events that I know about, the more I can go in and manually change the dates, because I know there's going to be high demand. The other thing that I do is when I know I'm going to give you an example of something that happened. It was kind of a fluky thing, but it also worked out really well. So when I know there's a big holiday, I'm on a lake, right? When there's a big holiday up, sometimes what I'll do is I'll manually go in and snooze my listing. So that just means that you cannot find it because I've snoozed it. So 4th of July weekend, our family was actually going to enjoy the holiday. Unfortunately, my husband came down with COVID right before that. So, and it had been blocked off. So what I did is I was like, well, if we're not going to be there, then we're going to go ahead and Airbnb it. So the Thursday before 4th of July, I unchecked it. I made it available. I raised my prices a lot, like 50% above what I normally do. And I made my minimum stay 3 nights, because if I wasn't going to be able to use it, I wanted to make some money. And if I was going to Airbnb it, I really wanted to make sure I was maximizing the weekend. And within hours, I had a 5-day booking. I covered all my expenses and then some for the entire month in one weekend. So snoozing your listing is basically going in manually and just delisting it for a certain amount of time. You can do it for 24 hours. It'll default to 48 hours, but what I'll do is I'll go in and snooze it for maybe 6 hours or maybe 1 hour. And somehow that re-triggers the algorithm and you come back up to the top. And every time I do it, I always get bookings. You can also lose bookings if you price too high. As you can see, I have a little typo there. So you can also, for the same weekend, now it has to do with your competition. So in another one of my videos, I talk about how to find out who your competition is and what they're charging. So if you're not getting bookings and your competition is, let's say they're at 195 a night on a Friday night, or 225 or whatever the number is. So all you have to do is, you don't have to drop it $50. Just go in and drop it $10. So if your competition is $200 a night, put your nightly rate at 190. Why? Because people are going to, if it's comparable. Now, if they have a really fancy, $500 night Airbnb, and yours is typically 200, that's not the same. You have to kind of compare apples to apples, but you can go in and you can see who your competition is and what they're charging for that same weekend, and you can go and be a little bit under to try and get more bookings. So the market itself is very price sensitive. So because people are, with the economy the way it is now, people are, and I think do, when they go on vacation, because they want to spend their money on, they want to have a nice place to stay, a safe place for their family, but they also don't want it to break the bank, right? So they're going to look at, okay, well, if your house and my house are similar in what we offer, maybe you have a Keurig and I don't, are you going to get a booking, or, $10 more a night than I am? That kind of thing. So you have to kind of be sensitive to the market and know your high and low seasons. So I'm going to just pick Arizona because I used to live there. So I was just talking to a friend of mine that has a house in Scottsdale, Arizona. Very nice area. Phoenix has a lot to offer. It is like 120 degrees there right now. You know what I mean? So, but he has a lot of amenities, and an hour out of the city, you can get up in the mountains, you can go south, so there's a lot of things that he does to entice people to his property. But his high season is when when it's cooler in Phoenix, when you like February, March, April, and his slower periods are like June, July, and August because it's so hot there. So know what your seasonality is for your own short-term rental. What I'm going to charge at the lake in December is probably not going to be, now I can charge quite a bit in December around holidays, but December 5th through the 15th, I'm probably going to be lower because it's cold out, unless we have an unusually warm December, but no one's going to be flocking to, when it's 30 degrees out to the lake. So just kind of know what but on the same token, if I had a place in Colorado and it was a ski season, then that would be high, so it goes for any of the locations. And I talk about checking your competition. I think there's enough business out there for all of us. I'm not saying, but, if I am trying to get more bookings, I need to be aware of who my competitors are. But not only that, it's good to know the other hosts when you can. And so I'm actually part of a network. So if I have a vacancy, I could say, hey, I have a vacancy. And so they might know somebody who's contacting them. And so you can use other hosts as a referral system too. So that's just another way to get bookings. So don't be afraid. I'll hear people talk about saturation and too many short-term rentals. And yes, to a certain degree, you do need to pay attention to, like, you don't want to be the 10th, short-term rental on the same street, right? You don't want to do that. But by the same token, if you get into a network with other short-term rental owners, you can use each other as resources, right? To share good and bad guests. So I talked about the KPI. So this is that screen I wanted to go to. So there's what's called the booking rate. So if you go onto your listing on Airbnb, and so the average, so it doesn't have to be a huge number, this is like for all, it's an average of all short-term rentals, right? I got this number from Airbnb. The average is about 1 to 3% booking rate. So what does that mean? So you take the number of views that you have, right, on your property. So it tracks like how many people actually look at your listing, but they didn't book it. So for example, if you have 200 views on a property in a month and you get a 2% booking rate, you're going to have 4 bookings per month. So that's not bad. Like if your goal is to get 4, like my goal is to get 3 bookings a month. But if I want to go more than that, I need to work on my booking rate. So how do you do that? Well, we're going to kind of talk about that. Oops, just hit the wrong button on my computer. Bear with. There we go. Okay, this is actually the KPI that from one of my Airbnbs. So you can see this is for the month of June. And typically, like I said, most of the people that looked in May and June were booking for maybe a week or two out. I think I had maybe one person that went into August, but this is how many bookings you get in a month. So it could be for that month or the month out, but it gives you kind of an idea. So I had 252 views on this one property, and you can see when you can actually look at when are people looking. So this week was, pretty slow in June, and then we're getting closer to 4th of July. So I had 252 views on one property, and I got 6 bookings. And those 6 bookings, now what it doesn't tell you is how long the booking was. In this case, the bookings were, at least 2 days. On this particular property, I had it set at 3 days, meaning that was the minimum stay. So I got 6 bookings. So my booking rate was 2.4%. So it was between that 1 and 3%. So that's pretty good. I've had months where it was 0 because it was, I had an Airbnb that went up that had a pool. We put it up in December. Yeah, I didn't get a booking until like February, and I was working it, trying really work. I know a lot more than I did then. So, but it doesn't have a heated pool, right? And so who wants to go swimming in December, even in Texas? So this is just one. So if you are struggling saying, well, how can I get more bookings? First of all, let's look at how many views you're getting. Are you even coming to the top of the search engine, right? So that's the first thing. So do you have amenities? Is your location good? What are you offering? That's what people are searching for. And then if they do view your property, but they don't book it, then you start having to ask yourself, well, why aren't they booking? Do you have professional photographs? Do you have, how is your listing description? Do you have pictures underneath words under the description, under the pictures of what they're looking at? And one tip that I learned from someone else is that when you're doing your Airbnb listing, that you should look at the pictures and have somebody else look at them for you. And as people are entering the property, so maybe they see the front of the property and then they walk in, they see the living room, they see the kitchen, and you kind of take them on a visual tour of your property. And as far as I know, you can't do videos on Airbnb. I think someone asked that before. And you want to give them an idea. It's great to do like close-ups of games and, flowers or whatever it is that you have, but they need to kind of have a sense of how big the space is. And so when you have a lot of views, so if you're somebody that has, let's say 1,000 views, like whatever it is you're doing about your property, you are attracting people to look at it. They love looking at your property, but they're not booking it. And so booking is where you're going to make money. So it's great to have 1,000 views, but if nobody's booking your property, you're not making money. So the 2 numbers that you need to know with a short-term rental is what your competition is charging per night, which you can get from Airbnb. So I have a video on YouTube that talks about how to find this, but basically you log in as a guest and you go to search for whatever area that you're thinking about investing in. So for those of you who are thinking about, well, I want to invest in this area or that area, you would want to go and play around with different dates on the Airbnb guest calendar so you can kind of get it. Because if you tried to do, let's say 4th of July weekend at a lake, a lot of the properties won't show up because they're booked, right? So your idea is to find properties that are not booked, but you want to try and find all the properties. And then once you pull that up, what you can do is you can literally zoom in on the little map that comes up. And if you keep zooming enough, it takes a little, going in there, the street names will start popping up. So when I was looking at a short-term rental, I wanted to know, well, how many of them are there in this area and what are they charging? And so, I kept doing that and kept doing it until I was able to feel comfortable within a certain range. Okay, there's, 10 short-term rentals. All of them are not even like the property that I'm doing, and none of them have this humongous deck / boat dock / swim deck, right? And they were doing pretty good because I would go in and I was like, okay, they're booked this date, but they're not booked this date. And then what you can charge per night. So that's through the AirDNA, and you can literally go in, and once you get to AirDNA's website, now I get asked this all the time. I do not pay for the subscription. I have a free account. I create an account, and then when I'm looking at properties, I can just go in and put the address in, and it'll pop up and it'll tell me some numbers and give me a little report about the property that could be a potential short-term rental. So that's important. It's just an estimate. This is not hardcore numbers, but it gives you an idea of what you can make. Okay, on the competition, this is like kind of an example of, you log on to Airbnb as a guest, you do a search for the size property, because if you're looking at a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo, that's what you need to search for, not a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom house, and vice versa. And you'll keep zooming in. I think this was in Dallas, and you can start to see that the streets, start coming up, the street names, and then you can click on all of these. And when you click on them, it'll take you to the listing. So it's super, once you know how to do it, it's really easy to find your competition. So these vary. You can see there's, some really high-end ones, and then there's some lower ones. And then, this will just tell you, you'll have to click on them to find the size, but you can kind of see in this area, okay, that's good. And one question I get asked is, well, how do I determine if there's, an HOA or regulations? And by doing this, you can see if there's a lot of short-term rentals in a particular area, there's probably no restrictions or limited restrictions. Now, you still need to do your due diligence and make sure nothing has changed. And this is where that network of hosts come in, where you can ask them, hey, I see that you have a property in such and such a subdivision, have you run into it? Now, some hosts are, I reached out to a host one time, and they said, I asked them, I said, oh, hey, they actually were in Dallas investors, and they had a property close to where I was thinking about investing. So I just reached out to them, and they said, yeah, it's harder than you think. So they really weren't very helpful. So I'm not saying all hosts, but if you ask me, I would help you. So now this is what AirDNA looks like after you put it in. This was actually a property that I had under contract at one time that I was thinking about making into short-term rental. The numbers didn't work, the floor plan didn't work, the area didn't work, but I did want to know how much I could get if this was part of my due diligence, how I kind of figured out my exit strategy, if you will. I ended up wholesaling this house, but this one said that I could get about $221 a night. And then if you click on below here, it's not on the thing, but what it'll show you is an occupancy rate, meaning how often did they think this property would rent. And this happened to have a very low occupancy rate. So I was just like, okay, we need a different strategy for this property. But like I said, I have the free account. All you do is enter the property address. You adjust for the number of beds. So if it's a 3-bedroom, this house happened to be a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and it was so cost prohibitive to put in a second bathroom. There was just so many things wrong with this house. Like, it was a total gut job. But I could go in and adjust. You can see if I had put in, would I have made more money? I don't know. Said 3 bedrooms. If I made it into a 4-bedroom, would I make more money? Sometimes it, is only like a $5 difference. So sometimes just having more doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make more. So it's just an estimation of earnings. But if you're considering doing a short-term rental, you need to know 2 things. One, how many other short-term rentals are in the same exact area? Because that is your competition, right? And are you going to be able to afford to, I have a friend that she does wonderful short-term rental. I would never have a property next to hers, because hers is going to get booked every time, just the way she decorates it. She's very high end, not necessarily high end properties, but the way she decorates it. She just puts more money into it than I would. So, what's your budget going to be? So how can you make the numbers work? So that's what you need to figure out. And then the next thing is, what could that property possibly make as a short-term rental? So those are the 2. So once you get the location figured out, then you can go, okay, well, what kind of attractions are there? What's going to draw people? Okay, now can I make money at it? So just like anything in real estate, you have to do your due diligence. Now, pricing adjustments. Let's kind of just talk about pricing adjustments and strategies. So we've already talked about follow competing properties. So this is not like set it and forget it, right? You're going to go in there because, again, throughout the year, you're going to have, high booking areas and low booking seasons, so you need to know, and if you are running slow or not getting the number of inquiries or whatever this case is, go out as a guest on Airbnb and find out what is happening with other people's. There was a time when things just, like I said, in August, I saw a lot of posts, a lot of feedback that a lot of things slowed down in August. I mean, it was just hot. People were getting, I mean, in Texas here, school started, I think, like, I don't know, the second week of August. It was super early this year. Um, Set nightly rates, adjust for weekdays. So here's a little tip for you. If you want to try and make more money on your short-term rental. So if you go in, let's say you've set your minimum nights that people can stay are 2 nights. And what are people going to do? They're going to typically book a Friday night or Saturday night. Well, once they've booked, you can go in and you can, send a email or communicate through the app to your guests. Say, hey, if you can, adjust your plans, you want to come in on Thursday, and you give them a discount. So maybe you give them 50% off. So maybe it's $200 a night. You're going to offer them 100 if they come in on Thursday. Or you could say, hey, if you're able to extend your stay one day, I'm going to give you a 35% discount. Now they're already coming to your property. You already have the booking. So if you ask every single guest, hey, can you come in a day early, or do you want to leave a day earlier or later? And you offer a discount, even if 50% of the people did that, that's great, because that's just more money in your pocket, because they're already coming. They've already paid the cleaning fee, right? It's not like you're extending it for 2 weeks. I typically, depending on the property, I will do a 3-night minimum, but all my other ones are 2 nights. And again, it depends. So like holiday weekends, Labor Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, I'll do a 3-night minimum, because number one, I'm conscientious of my cleaning crew. So I actually, have had it where the guest has checked out on a holiday and I have another guest checking in. So yes, my cleaning company does it. They do charge a little bit more money for the same day turnover on a holiday. But now that I've been offering that little discount for people, then I don't have to pay extra for her to turn it on the same day. Offer discounts in low season. So remember in the beginning, I talked about direct booking. So one of the things that as a short-term rental owner, you'll want to move to not just being reliant on Airbnb and VRBO and booking.com and Furnish Finders and all the other ones. You'll want to move to a direct booking site, meaning you've got your website, you've got your properties up there. People can book directly through your website. And yes, there's insurance you can buy, and there's other things you can do to protect yourself. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building a database of people who have stayed with you, who have been good guests. And so we're getting ready to do this. We're getting ready for the slower months to email our former guests. These are all people who have already stayed at our property. They're already 5-star guests, right? They're not people that tear up your house. And I'm going to let them know, hey, for the month of December, I have this discount going on. If you want to book, blah, 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 the first 3 people or whatever it is. So you can then start communicating with folks and saying, hey, when you know that you have low seasons, you can start communicating and you can start building a repeat business. Of course, you can always charge for additional people. So we have a limit of 6, but we could sleep 8 if we had to. And I just charge $25 a person. Like I said before, we are pet friendly. I don't really get into security deposits. I have had good luck with on VRBO. They can buy insurance. I signed up so that they have to buy one type of insurance from VRBO, and Airbnb now has they have their insurance. And I know people have complained about it. I haven't ever had an issue. I mean, I did have to file a claim, and it was super easy to do, and I got my money right away. And then we never make any of our garages available with the listing. It's in our listing. Garage is not available. However, if people want to book the garage, they can do so for, let's say, another $50 or $75 a night, right? So there's other things that you can do. You can provide experiences. So we've gone back and forth. We own a boat, and we've thought about, we could provide boat experiences, or you can, we're not doing that liability issue. But if you have a way to create experiences, I know one lady I follow, she does she's pet friendly. And she offers photo shoots with the family and their dogs. And I guess that's just become a great income stream for her. So there's all kinds of things. Get creative about what you can do to make more money. It's not just about the booking, it's about the experience. Now, how to stay booked. So the platforms, like I said, Airbnb, VRBO, booking.com, there's corporate bookings, there's Furnish Finders. you want to focus on the quality of bookings. So for me, Furnished Finders really hasn't worked out yet. That's the traveling nurses site, because their stipend is so low that, it so far it hasn't worked out. Not saying I'm not doing it. I'm just saying that so far it hasn't worked on. I do check my metric numbers often, and like I said, I try to stay booked. I have a certain, for each property, I know exactly what I need to know, how much money I need to make for each property. And if I'm not making that metric, then I need to focus on getting quality bookings, because I'm not going to lower my price so much that I'm just going to get a booking, because that doesn't work, because then you end up getting people that might not take care of your property. I talked about snoozing the listing, but also touching your listing. So anytime you go in, and you can, now I've never altered the title of my Airbnb listings, but I do change out the cover photo. I do go in and change the description. And just those little things, it's kind of like if you combine that with the snoozing, somehow, I don't know how to explain it, but it kind of refreshes the algorithm, if you will, so that you come to the top. Because remember, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get viewed. You're trying to get people to see your property. If you didn't have an ironing board before, or if you added, let's say, I don't know, a special coffee thing, or the dedicated workspace, then you can go in and add those. We haven't done this. I do have a new grandbaby, so we will be doing this, but we didn't have a pack and play, a high chair. Well, now one of our listings is going to have that. And so when I go in to update my amenities, that also helps get you back up there, because if you're seeing a slowdown, go look at your views. If your views are down, then you need to do something to kind of refresh that listing. And then, as I said, as you're going through being a short-term rental owner, make sure you're moving and working towards a direct booking site. And the reason I say this is that you never want this is your business, right? You never want Airbnb or VRBO to dictate to you the terms of how you're going to run your business. So as an example, this is kind of a big one, but when COVID hit, Airbnb made a business policy change that said, terms of service, any person who said they had COVID, they got to cancel penalty free. And so what did that mean for the host? The host lost tons of money. I mean, they did this just across the board. There was no input. Now, if that happened to you and you had a list of people that had already booked with you, then you can say, hey, I have some openings coming up, or, whatever it is. And so you get to take control of your business, right? And you're in control of it. The other thing, we'll talk more about marketing this week as well. But there's some things that you can do, from a social media standpoint and things like that. Well, it's 4:00, guys, so I'm going to wrap up, and I want to say thank you to everybody that was here. And for those that are watching the replay, we're here tomorrow. It's going to be the same time, kind of a weird time, 3 p.m. And we will send the replay links out to everyone before 3 tomorrow, so that you can have that. We just have to edit the first part of the video where I'm getting all ready. Now, I have my great person, Mila, on here with me. And Mila, do we have any questions? Or does anybody have any questions?
You have some postings on chat,
Okay.
Nancy. Yeah,
All right.
they mentioned the STR or
And
the
hi,
experience
Chris.
that
How
they
are
had.
you?
Also, Gary has posted something.
You can take pictures. Okay, so was that from Chris? I'm mainly interested in the analysis of potential property summary for what I do for my long terms. What are the monthly expenses? Okay, good question, Chris. Actually, it's all the same, except you have to have better insurance, because the long-term rental insurance is not going to be the same for short-term. You're going to have utilities, you're going to have Wi-Fi, you're going to have lawn service. If you have a pool or hot tub, you're going to have all of that. You're going to have the cost of restock. So in addition, because one thing I want to say with short-term rentals, you got to have some cash. Even if you're going to do rental arbitrage, which is where you go and lease a property from somebody else and you turn around, you've got to furnish it. So for a 3-bedroom, you're probably going to spend around $10,000 by the time you furnish it with beds and things like that. Now, I did a house where I did it completely off of Facebook Marketplace, except for the mattresses. I did all the furniture, all the high end. It already had the appliances and things like that. But you have cost of toilet paper, cleaning, trash bags, towels, linen. So if you have a house on all my houses, I said they sleep, either 6 or 8 people, and I have 3 sets of towels, washcloths. I buy makeup washcloths for all the guests, right? So you got to have enough of that. You have to have at least, minimum 2 sets of linens for each bed. So that's the comforter, because if you have same day change, you need 1. So we have 3, because when you have same day change, you just don't want to be having your cleaners stress out because they can't all the laundry done. Marla's doing rental arbitrage. So would you agree, Marla, that it does take a little bit of a penny to get it up and running, depending again on the size of the property and everything? And then for obtaining loans for short-term rental, yes, there are more and more lenders now, and there's so many things that's dependent on, your credit. You could buy it as a vacation home and, second home and only put 10% down. I don't know what the interest rates. The way I bought mine is I find asset-based lenders. These are people who take the property and they look at the value, and I always have to have equity. Usually have to have a pretty good down payment. Of course, you could buy it sub 2, and so there's different creative financing. You can use a private money lender. So that's kind of another presentation about lending. And I do have a YouTube video. I did it with, I think it's released. Mila, is it released? The one with Renee Ray. It's like the secrets of an underwriter. And we talk about lending and, what people should be aware of. So I don't know if it doesn't specifically talk about short-term rentals, but just when you're an investor and you're trying to buy or to get loans, one of the best things that I've done is I make a point at least 2 or 3 times a year. I drive around and I find community banks like that are local, and I have my business plan about what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be investing. And they have their board of directors and they make all the decisions within the bank, right? They don't have to go out to this, this underwriting world. Everything is done in-house. And those are some of the best lenders that I have been able to find. The interest rate is not going to be the cheapest, but that's okay, because when you start buying properties, you have to be creative about how you're going to get them. And then you can always refinance them. And then there's, I've used credit unions for what's called portfolio loans. Like you take all your properties, roll into one. So that's kind of a different presentation that I will be talking about in September. I'll be talking about how to acquire private money through short self-directed IRAs. If any of you are going to be interested in that, I'm going to be doing kind of a 3-day thing on how to use your self-directed IRA to buy properties or become a private money lender. Are you taxed differently? Are you taxed differently? Well, are you talking about the hotel tax that you have to pay? In Texas with Airbnb, they automatically charge the guest, take care of it, pay it, and everything. When I was with my property management company, I signed up with a company called, I think it was called My Tax Lodge or something like that. And it was like a subscription service, and you pay $20, but you had to send them the report of all your earnings and then, what you owed. And then you would send the money to them, and then they would send it to the taxing entity. So yes, you do have to pay taxes. Like usually it's called a hot tax, hotel tax, occupancy tax. And that's usually calculated on Airbnb for you. And if you're, depending on the state you're in, so definitely check with your CPA about that. And as far as like taxing for your taxes, since I'm not a CPA, I'm not really gonna, I just give to my accountant, here's all my income, here's my expenses. So and then preferred net cash flow amount per property. It's just a lot, I mean, here's what I want to say. When you first get started with Airbnb, if you're buying the property, you're furnishing it, you're probably really not going to see a huge return on investment the first year because if you, depending on how you furnish it. So I made a big mistake. I bought the property and then I just went down to Nebraska Furniture Bot and I bought a whole house full of brand new furniture. Now I did it, 4 years, same as cash, whatever. But still, I incurred that debt. So then I got smarter about it and started using Facebook Marketplace. And then I started buying more items in bulk at, Costco and things like that. So, when I got real excited, and I think it's tomorrow, we're talking about, emotionally invested in your properties. And because it was my own personal vacation home, plus, I was going to Airbnb it, I did get a little carried away with, you know, me more of Nancy than normally I would put in my um Airbnbs. So usually, you always want to treat it like a business. Do you have a business LOC for capital since you use for furnishing? So we have everything in our, we have not an LLC, but a limited partnership that everything is in for our short-term rental business. Um, so I don't know if that's, so the way I got up, so I don't know if I am answering it. So the line of credit was just part of the loan, right? So if we got X amount for loan, but then we would create our own lines of credit with different department, like one of my tips for Home Depot is I went in there one day and I said, hey, you know what? I'm flipping properties and kind of thing. And I still do this with short-term rentals if I need supplies for rehab. And I said, what's the biggest line of credit you can give me? Because one thing about Home Depot is they usually always have some kind of special going on, like 6 months, same as cash, meaning, you buy it now, but you don't have to, as long as you pay it off in 6 months, 12 months, 3 months, whatever their terms are, you don't incur any interest. And I'm all about that. So I was able to get a $50,000 line of credit on my credit card, and I use that. And they have a way where you can be a pro member and we can assign like each property to the account so that when we track our expenses through my statement, I can do it my pro member statement and I can see, oh, I spent this much money from Home Depot and that. So I don't know. I haven't really applied for a line of credit just for the furnishings. We just got creative on how we furnish them. Did I get all of them? I think so. Yep. All right, guys. Well, hey, same time, same station tomorrow, 3 p.m. If you can't make it, it's okay. We will have the replay for everybody. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking more. I think tomorrow's about marketing and pricing and all of that, pricing strategies. So more tips for you tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me, and enjoy the rain and be safe. Talk to y'all later.